Want to keep up with the latest LEGO Mega 96.1 videos? Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. Hello everyone, LEGO Mega 96.1 here with another video. And welcome back to another On This Day in History. It was on this day in history back in 1862, the Union Army was defeated once again at a place called Bull Run, or Manassas as our southern guys call it. Now what am I talking about, of course? Well, all that has to do with the Second Battle of Bull Run, or the Second Battle of Manassas. And yes, it was the same place where the Union Army was defeated in July of 1861. And now, mind you, it's the same place that has different names. Like, for example, Bull Run, Manassas, Stones River, Murfreesboro, Sharpsburg, Antietam, Shiloh, Pittsburgh Landing. And like I said before, same place, same battle, different name.
And all are true.
There you go. Now, this fight lasted from August 28th to the 30th of 1862. And it was there that Lee pursued the ensuing Maryland campaign, in which, of course, would bring the end of the war. But that wasn't to be because, as we all know, the Antietam campaign, or the Maryland campaign, ended in a Union victory with the Union defeating the Confederates at South Mountain and later Antietam, and so on and so forth. Now, a brief history on Bull Run. As we all know, July 21st, 1861, that was the first major battle of the American Civil War. It was also there that Thomas Jonathan Jackson got the nickname Stonewall Jackson, because he stood like a stone wall, because he stood firm, and many Confederates said he stood like a stone wall, hence he got the nickname. And it was also there that the rebel yell was heard on that day as well. Now, the rebel yell, for those who don't know, was a battle cry of the Confederacy. Shelby Foote, from Ken Burns' Civil War documentary, described it as sort of a fox-eyed yip mixed with a banshee squall that would scare the bejesus out of anyone. Now, each Confederate unit has their own variety of the rebel yell. And in case all of you wondering, no, I'm not going to do the rebel yell because I'm with the Union. And I'm staying with the Union. Hurrah for Abe Lincoln, death to Jefferson Davis. Now, who was in command of this army was John Pope and Franz Sigel. Now, there were two armies that were there at Bull Run as well. That includes the Army of Virginia and the Army of the Potomac. Now, Franz Sigel actually had some military service before he came to America. And this guy was German. He was a German-born American military officer and a revolutionary who immigrated to the United States. He did service in Baden from 1843 to 1847, and he was a revolutionary in 1848. Hard to believe that was during the Mexican-American War. And speaking of German, he was also in command of the 11th Corps of the Army of the Potomac. Now, if you remember in Chancellorsville, which I covered in that battle, the 11th Corps was made up of German immigrants. Now, mind you, the Civil War not only had African Americans serving that war, but migrants as well. We had people coming from Russia, from Germany, Ireland, France, Britain, and pretty much all over the world. Oh, here's a fun fact that you didn't know. There was a Chinese immigrant that served with the 14th Connecticut. That man was Joseph Pierce. He was a Chinese American who served in that regiment and during the Civil War. Yeah, you didn't know that, did you? But enough of that. Let's get to Bull Run. Now, it was there following Jackson's capture of Manassas Junction, or now Manassas as we call it today. He captured Pope's supply line that threatened Washington. But it was so the two armies would meet again, and at a familiar place is where they got beaten before. Now, many veterans, if I recall correctly, he had some flashbacks of that of the first battle, because some of these guys served in 1861. They were the original Union volunteers. If you recall, they thought the battle would end. They thought the war would end after one big battle, which is why the soldiers' enlistments was 90 days, 3 months. But as we all know, after that fight, it changed. Don't make promises you can't keep. Now, some of the fighting at the Second Battle of Bull Run saw places like Bronner's Farm, Stoney's Ridge, and even at a railroad cut in Bull Run. Now, mind you, there were two railroad cuts during the Civil War. One, of course, being at Gettysburg, which I covered in July of this year, and one at Manassas, or Bull Run. For the sake of this video, I'm calling it Bull Run. I'm sorry to my guys in the South, but I'm calling it Bull Run. Now, Bronner's Farm. This was where an infamous brigade got a nickname. This brigade happens to be called the Iron Brigade. Now, the Iron Brigade were these elite crack soldiers of the Army of the Potomac. They're well known for their attire, like their long navy blue frock coat, the leg gaiters, their Lorenzo rifles, and even the big, tall black hats known as the Hardy hats. Now, these guys were later became part of the First Corps of the Army of the Potomac. Now, the units that were formed the Iron Brigade were men of the 2nd, 6th, and 7th Wisconsin and the 19th Indiana. The 24th didn't come around until later on in that particular war. And these guys, they just pretty much stood firm. And many Confederates say that they fought like iron, and that's how the Iron Brigade came to be. And mind you, the Iron Brigade is one of my favorite units. That and the Irish Brigade, the United States Colored Troops, the 20th Maine, and the Pennsylvania Reserves. Oh yeah, real stuff. And did you know that the Confederates actually threw rocks in that particular fight? Well, that's actually true. The reason why? Well, Confederates run out of ammunition, and they were critically low, and they saw Union forces advancing upon them. So what did they do? Are they going to retreat? Launch a counterattack? No. Instead, they collected rocks from the ground, and they actually threw it at Union forces. Oh yeah, I kid you not, they actually did it. And that something that reminds me of Antietam. If you remember from Civil War Combat, which is my favorite series, mind you, it covered Antietam. And if I recall correctly, a Confederate unit don't have any ammunition, so they taunted Union forces to come at them and fight. Some of them wave their flags, some of them yell at them, telling them to come here and fight. I mean, these guys, they're crazy. But when an officer rode up to James Longstreet and asked, "Where are your men?" he pointed to the flags and say, "There they are, and they haven't a cartridge." It's crazy. Now, the rock incident, this occurred on August 29th. Confederate troops that were under the command of Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson were holding a defensive line along an unfinished railroad cut after repelling repeated Union attacks. Now, Confederate ammunition on that day was running dangerously low. Now, like I said earlier, did they retreat? Did they fight back? No. As the Union troops were approaching, some Confederates reportedly began collecting rocks and began throwing rocks and stones at their enemy to hold the line. Now, the Union troops, stunned and bruised by the heavy stone, would occasionally return fire with rocks. In fact, if you remember this painting here, this actually happened. Now, although the rock throwing was a memorable story, it was not a decisive factor in the battle's outcome. The Confederate line was eventually held, and a massive counterattack led by James Longstreet's corps later that day crushed the Union's left flank and sealed the victory for the South. It's crazy. And also, in that particular fight, John Porter got himself in trouble. Yeah, John Porter was in command of the 5th Corps. And what happened to him was he was court-martialed for disobeying a direct order and misconduct. Now, of course, there was a court-martial on that day. And of course, they found him guilty. And now, as I said, he was found guilty of disobeying a lawful order and misconduct in front of the face of the enemy. Now, the specification was not engaging nor making any effort to engage Jackson's right flank as ordered on the afternoon of August 29th, but instead he fell back. The second specification, he fell back and while in earshot out of the battle and knowing his corps was needed without even attempting to ascertain the strength of the enemy. There were 4 specifications here. I'm just going over one by one. The third specification was falling back on August 29th while aware of Pope's attack was failing and therefore aiding in the defeat of the Union Army and placing it in jeopardy of the capital city, that being Washington. The fourth specification was moving slowly to attack on the 30th, and when the flank was commenced, not making a full effort and not attempting to rally his men or otherwise inspiring them to break through the enemy lines. I mean, look, I get it. You gotta do what's right for your guys, but when somebody gives you a lawful order, you obey it. I mean, I'm not a military guy, but I know what orders are. But there are times where you gotta take care of your soldiers. I mean, these guys, they're more than just soldiers. Some of them were even your neighbors, your friends. They live in the same town as you, go to the same church as you, go to the same buildings as you. They were just basic, everyday civilians. And I know you'd want to see somebody come home in a coffin or missing a limb. There are times where you've got to take care of your own people, your own soldiers. I mean, like I said, they're living individuals. Some of them who have jobs, who have family, friends. That's actually true. I mean, you don't want to see any one of them being thrown into a slaughter pen with no reason. And would you? No. There are times where you got to do what's right for your men. Now, of course, a trial was held, and of course they found him guilty. And they removed him from command. But however, the court-martial was later found unjust and was overturned, and Porter was reinstated into the Army of the United States once more. And the reason why? Well, the conviction, rather than ending in the controversy, served only to extend it. And coupled with disastrous losses at Fredericksburg and the near mutiny of Burnside's officers after the Mud March and the resurgence of the Democratic Party, back then, not right now. Now Porter immediately set up attempting to overturn the conviction and wanted back in command. But somehow, through luck, he found himself back in command once more, and the court-martial was overturned and reinstated him back into the army once more. Look, regardless of what Fitzporter did, or Fitzjohn Porter did, and right or wrong, the guy did what he had to do. Regardless of what any of you think, he's thinking about what is right. Right or wrong. Do not judge him. I mean, regardless of his rank and who he is, he's only human. Both Union and Confederate forces met on that battlefield, and the units involved was much bigger than it was back in July of 1861. This includes the Army of the Virginia and the Army of the Potomac. Those involved was the 3rd Corps, the 5th Corps, or the 6th Corps, the 11th Corps, the Kanawha Division, which was a detachment. This was the Union Army. And of course, we had the Army of Northern Virginia. Those in command of those armies was John Pope and Franz Sigel, who commanded the Union Army in that fight. And of course, we got Robert E. Lee. Now, sources tend to differ from the original source. Now, according to Wikipedia, which I'm on right now, and according to American Battlefield Trust, to which I am a member of, by the way, sources tend to differ from the original source. Now, the strength of the Union Army was an estimated total of 77,000. This includes 51,000 of the Army of Virginia, 26,000 of the Army of the Potomac. And the forces that were engaged, an estimated total of 63,000. The Confederates was 50,000. Now, according to American Battlefield Trust, the forces that were engaged was a total of 125,000 forces engaged. This includes 70,000 Union and 55,000 Confederates. But for the casualties, it tends to differ. For the Union casualties, it was 14,462 total. This includes 1,747 dead, 8,452 wounded, 4,263 captured or missing. The Confederates was 7,298 total. This includes 1,096 killed, 6,202 wounded. Now, according to the American Battlefield Trust, the estimated total of both casualties on that day was 21,849 casualties. Now, the Union casualties was exactly the same as I referenced on Wikipedia, 14,462. The Confederates was 7,387 total. Yeah, that's a big difference. Somehow, it was higher than it was mentioned on Wikipedia. Now, following the defeat, this battle embodied Lee to initiate the ensuing Antietam, Maryland campaign. And as we all know, in that particular campaign, the Confederates won on Harper's Ferry and Shepherdstown, but the Union won South Mountain and Antietam. Now, Harper's Ferry, this lasted from the 12th to the 15th of 1862, just as before the Battle of Antietam. And of course, I'll cover that later on in a later video. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, that was it. And that concludes this video. Now, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like this, including many other videos that I've done on my channel, please feel free to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell notifications, that way you can be notified when I upload the next video. And as always, this is LEGO Mega 96-1, signing off.